Hello, everyone. Tonight we journey to a place of marble glory, iron law, and very little mercy. A city where the streets echoed with the stomping of legions, the clash of sandals against stone, and the quiet suffering of those who built it all, by force. Imagine the grand temples glowing under the Mediterranean sun, fountains gurgling in public squares, and finely robed senators debating virtue while their slaves held the scrolls. Rome, the eternal city, the crown jewel of antiquity. But we're not here for the postcard version. We're diving into its underbelly, a world not carved in marble but chained in silence. Because behind every polished villa and golden laurel, someone, millions of someones, were bleeding their days away in servitude. And tonight, you'll meet them. Their breath lingers in the bricks. Their footsteps carve the roads. Their stories are not often told. And once you've stepped into their sandals, you might find you don't want to take them off. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm doing here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I always love seeing who's still awake with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin tonight's journey together. Close your eyes for a moment, just a breath. You're standing in Rome at the height of its power, not the bloody battlefield kind of Rome. No, the thriving metropolis, buzzing with markets and mosaics. There are olives in your nose and baked bread in the air. Senators strut past you, arguing about taxes, while children run barefoot between marble columns. It's beautiful. It's alive. It's deadly. Because this isn't your Rome. You're not a senator or a merchant or even a free citizen. You're a slave. You don't remember when it happened. Maybe you were born to it. Maybe your village surrendered. Maybe a ship docked and your name vanished into a ledger. What matters is that your life is no longer yours. And you're not alone. You're surrounded, on the street, in the kitchens, the fields, the baths, by people like you. Enslaved, shackled, forgotten. Rome is a well-oiled machine, and every gear is greased with human labor. In fact, in this Rome, 1 in every 3 people is a slave. In the city itself, that number climbs closer to 1 in 2. That's not an accident. It's by design. Because Rome isn't just a civilization, it's a system, one that runs on conquest, vanity, and exploitation. Every aqueduct, every feast, every philosophical monologue about stoic virtue comes with a price tag written in someone else's blood, sweat, and stolen freedom. And that's where our story begins, not in the Senate hall, but in a cramped, dark storeroom under a nobleman's house where Felix, age 26, is folding tunics he'll never wear. His hands are cracked, his back aches, and he hasn't seen the sun since last festival day. But he remembers it. He dreams in color because that's all he has left. Above him, Mira, 22, is rocking a screaming child. It's not hers. It never will be. But she's the wet nurse, the maid, the nanny, the ghost. She knows every creak in this house, every crack in the ceiling, every word that isn't meant for her ears but is always her responsibility. They serve, obey, and vanish, like furniture that breathes. Now let's go deeper. Underground, behind the city walls, in the dim corners of massive estates, there are even more. Daria, 30, wakes up on a pile of straw that smells like goats and yesterday's sorrow. Her shift begins before the sun, ends after it sets. No breaks, no questions. She tends vines for wine she'll never taste, and if she stumbles too often, she won't be replaced. She'll just be removed. Overseeing her is Severus, 40, a former slave now promoted to enforce the rules. He's not free, just higher on the ladder, and he carries that burden like a whip. You see, in Rome, the field slaves didn't have it better. They had it worse, much worse. If you were bought for your muscles, that's all you were allowed to be. A tool, a breathing plow, a living scythe. You woke before the crows, ate a crust of barley bread hard enough to insult your teeth. Then out into the sun until your skin cracked and your soul flaked off like the dust from your sandals. And the rules were clear. Work until you break. And then make room for someone who hasn't yet. There's a reason Roman landowners favored latifundia, vast farming estates that swallowed up entire valleys. Not because they loved agriculture, but because with enough slaves, you didn't need innovation. You just needed obedience and maybe a few chains, but don't think the city was kinder. Back in the heart of Rome, slaves weren't just labor. They were everything. Scribes, barbers, accountants, teachers, musicians, lovers. Whatever the master wanted, they became, and whatever they were before, erased. You don't get your story told in the history books when your name was sold with the livestock. But tonight, we tell it, because tonight your name is Lucia. You're 18. You once carved tiny animals from driftwood back home in Corinth. Now your fingers bleed from stitching gowns for a woman who doesn't know you exist. She'll compliment the dress, not the hands that made it. That's how Rome works. Glory at the top, grime at the bottom. But every brick in this empire's walls, placed by someone whose name we've lost. Someone who lived and cried and fought and loved in chains. So stay with me, because we're just getting started. And the next part of our journey will take us deeper into the trade that made this possible. Into the slave markets of Delos, where Tavros, 35, stands naked before a crowd, teeth bared like a mule for auction. You won't want to miss what happens next. But that comes later. The sound hits you first. Not words, not music, just noise. Clinking chains, heavy footsteps, and the low hum of discontent that only hundreds of frightened people can make when they're all trying not to scream. Welcome to the slave market. You're in Delos now, a Greek island sun-soaked and sea-wrapped, charming if you're a poet, horrifying if you're property. There are rows of men and women here, standing silently in the dust, stripped down for easy inspection. Some are trembling. Some are still. All are waiting. And there in the middle of it stands Tavros. He's 35. He's from Thrace, or maybe he used to be. What he is now is naked, sunburned, and trying not to make eye contact with the merchant currently yanking his jaw open to inspect his molars. You see, Tavros didn't come here by choice. He was a mercenary once, a decent one too. He'd survived battles that left others scattered like crushed olives. But when the money ran out and the promises vanished, he was sold by the very army he served. Now his calloused hands, the ones that once held a sword, are bound behind his back. The merchant jots something on a wax tablet. Good muscle tone. Bad attitude. Probable trouble. Half price. Next to him stands Lucia, 18, still clinging to the last scraps of dignity like it might shield her. It won't. She's been made to turn around 3 times for a man who just sniffed her hair like he was choosing a horse. Lucia doesn't speak. She knows better. Every word she says adds a price or subtracts it or gets twisted into a reason for punishment. Her worth is in silence now, in how still she can stand, in how well she cannot cry. In this market, you are judged like fruit, prodded like cattle, haggled over like used shoes. Age, health, looks, origin, even your teeth. Each detail a line item on a price tag you never agreed to wear. A pretty girl from Greece might fetch 2,000 sesterces. A strong field hand from Gaul? Maybe half that. If you're too young, you're an investment. Too old, you're a burden. Too clever, that's dangerous. But nobody cares about your name. No one here wants to know who you were, only what you can do and how long you'll last. The traders shout numbers, bidders raise fingers, the slaves do nothing. They've learned that hope costs more than they can afford. Eventually, Tavros is sold to a man in a red tunic with too many rings and not enough patience. He doesn't ask Tavros if he understands Latin. He doesn't care. He just points and the guards drag him away, already shackling his ankles with a chain that's seen too many wrists. Lucia's turn comes next. Her buyer is silent, wealthy, clearly. His tunic is clean, and his slaves stand behind him with perfect posture. He nods once, and she's pulled down from the platform and told to follow. She walks like she's still dreaming, and now, their new lives begin. Tavros is sent to the countryside, a latifundium, a massive estate filled with olives, grapes, and human misery. The land stretches for miles, and the air smells like crushed weeds and sun-scorched dirt. There's no welcome, just work. He's told to dig, then to carry, then to cut. There is no learning curve, only a sharp one. His overseer, Severus, watches him like a hawk, ready with a staff and the kind of grin that only comes from long years of power without empathy. Tavros learns quickly, not because he's obedient, but because the whip stings harder when you aren't. At night, he sleeps in a wooden shed with 30 other men. There's no privacy, no blankets, no air. Just breathing, scratching, and the occasional quiet sob from someone who can't pretend anymore. Meals come twice a day, if you can call them that. Barley porridge, sometimes with a hint of mold if you're lucky. Bread, hard enough to chip a tooth. Water that tastes like it had a conversation with the well rat. You eat to survive, not to live. Meanwhile, Lucia is brought into the household of a Roman senator. She is given a shift to wear plain linen and instructed in her new duties: folding, sewing, serving, cleaning, and always silence. Her mistress never looks at her. Her master sometimes does, and that's worse. In this grand villa, marble floors gleam, statues leer from corners, and gold glints on every surface. But none of it belongs to Lucia. Her world is the gaps between footsteps, the breaths she holds when someone enters the room, the weight of 100 eyes that never meet hers but always judge. She sees Felix there, also a slave, slightly older, quiet. He shows her how to fold a toga correctly, how to move without making noise, how to disappear inside your own body. They don't talk much. Talking is dangerous, but in a place where no one hears you, a glance can mean everything. Outside, Rome celebrates itself. Gladiators fight, senators shout, citizens cheer, but none of that touches the lives of Tavros, Lucia, Felix, or Mira. Because in Rome, glory is a ladder, and they are the rungs. And yet, they endure. Tavros grows stronger, not in hope, but in habit. He learns which tasks are safest, which overseers are merciful, which days might bring rest. He marks time with bruises and seasons. Lucia becomes efficient, invisible. She learns to anticipate commands before they're spoken. She learns to laugh at her mistress's jokes without letting her voice crack. She learns to survive. They don't dream. Dreaming hurts. But sometimes, late at night when the villa is quiet or the fields are still, they remember. A face, a song, a promise made before they were someone else's possession. That's the thing about humans. Even when you strip away everything, names, rights, freedom, some ember of who they were refuses to go out. And as we'll see soon, sometimes that ember ignites. But for now, the city sleeps. Tavros lies in straw, sore but breathing. Lucia folds her last tunic of the day, eyes heavy. Somewhere far from both of them, chains clink softly in the dark as new arrivals shuffle into the next auction. And tomorrow, it starts again. Morning again. Not that it feels much different. There are no alarm clocks, just the slap of sandals on stone and the low bark of orders from someone with a whip and a schedule. The sun hasn't even cleared the rooftops, but already the city of Rome is alive. Unfortunately, so is Tavros, and that means it's time to work. He doesn't wake up. He's woken by a shout, a kick, or the chill of a metal bucket tipped too enthusiastically. This is life now. Rise, labor, endure, repeat. The latifundium stretches out before him like a punishment that never ends. Rows of grapevines, olive trees, and sweat-stained soil. Today, it's weeding. Tomorrow, maybe plowing, or pruning, or moving stones that seem to breed in the night. The task isn't important, only the result. Only that the overseers see him working when they glance his way. And Severus does glance. Often. He walks the rows with a staff and a scowl, his boots barely dusty. Proof that other people suffer, so he doesn't have to. Faster, he growls at one point, without even looking directly at Tavros. Tavros doesn't respond. He just grips the hoe tighter and keeps going. He's learned that backtalk buys nothing but bruises. Silence, though, it buys time. Meanwhile, back in the city, Lucia is already halfway through her morning shift. She rises with the first light to prepare breakfast. Not hers, of course. Hers is whatever crust she can steal from the kitchen without being noticed. But the household eats well. Fruit, cheese, fresh bread, wine, diluted just enough to feel civilized. She serves without being seen. That's the goal. If she's lucky, no one speaks to her. If she's very lucky, they forget she exists. Because when the master remembers her, things get worse. She polishes bronze until her hands smell like metal. She scrubs mosaics with vinegar and a rag until the tile gleams like someone else's pride. And then she does laundry, the never-ending mountain of linen, tunics, and togas that the senator and his wife treat like disposable napkins. The senator's name is Publius. He's important. He reminds everyone of that. Loudly. Often. with gestures and anecdotes that involve a lot of gesturing and not much humility. His wife, Claudia, is quieter, but not kinder. Lucia irons her gowns with heated stones. She arranges her hair. She fetches her jewelry, brushes her dogs, and pretends not to hear the things Claudia says about her. "She's clever," Claudia mutters once to a friend, sipping watered wine. "Too clever. Might have to sell her before she starts having opinions." Lucia doesn't flinch. Not externally. Internally, something coils tighter. Elsewhere, Mira is managing a screaming toddler whose lungs seem to have ambitions in the theatrical arts. She bounces, rocks, hums, a lullaby her own mother once sang to her, a song she hasn't heard in years, not since her village was burned, not since she was told she'd be useful in a Roman nursery. The baby's name is Gaius. He spits up on her twice before noon. Mira doesn't mind. She minds everything else. Felix is repairing scrolls. It's a job that requires patience, which he has, and respect, which no one gives him. He copies legal texts he'll never use, treaties he'll never benefit from, and speeches filled with lofty ideals that seem allergic to reality. One line sticks with him today. Something about libertas, freedom. He snorts softly. If that scroll were alive, it would beg to be rewritten. Now let's step away. Just a moment. Let's zoom out. Because this isn't just one house, one estate, one field. This is Rome. And slavery isn't a stain here. It's the thread that holds the fabric together. You can't go a block without stepping over the labor of a slave. They haul bricks. They pour lead into pipes. They serve, sweep, stitch, scrub, slaughter, and suffer. They die so others can dine. And the city keeps turning. Statues are unveiled. Gladiators are cheered. Senators campaign. Poets recite verses about virtue while their meals are prepared by someone whose name they never bothered to learn. And beneath all that, millions like Tavros and Lucia keep the empire breathing. But something's shifting. It starts small. A whisper passed between hands in the latifundium, a look exchanged during a water break, a story told quietly by firelight about a man who once fought back, a man named Spartacus. Tavros hears the name from a Gaul chained 2 rows over. "Spartacus?" he says, voice low. The Gaul nods. "Thracian, gladiator, escaped Capua, took 70 others with him." Tavros doesn't believe it, not at first. 70 slaves, escaping from a gladiator school, formed an army, the Gaul adds. More than 100,000, they say. Beat the legions, twice. Tavros can't help but laugh. Not because it's funny, because it's insane. But part of him wants to believe it, that someone could break the system, that someone already has. Back in Rome, Lucia hears the name too. Overheard in the courtyard, a passing merchant, loud with drink, says something about rebels in the south, about Spartacus marching, about panic in the Senate. Lucia doesn't say anything, but that night when she scrubs the same floor she always scrubs, she moves a little slower, not out of laziness, out of thought. What if? It's a dangerous question. It sparks things you're not supposed to feel. But once asked, it doesn't go away. And Spartacus isn't just a name now. He's a possibility. A flicker. A match held up in the dark. No one dares say it aloud. But Tavros sharpens his hoe with more care than usual, just in case. Lucia stashes an extra piece of bread under a floor tile, just in case. Mira starts humming that lullaby again, louder now, like a reminder, just in case. Even Felix, quiet Felix, copies his next scroll with a trembling hand, because the text isn't a legal decree this time, it's a list of names. And one of them, he's sure, is a senator who voted to crush the rebellion. The city doesn't notice, but the cracks are there, the kind that don't show up until the walls fall. And somewhere, far from marble villas and dusty fields, a man with a sword and a broken chain on his wrist is gathering more than followers. He's gathering momentum. That's where we'll go next. The whispers grow legs. At first, it's just murmurs, tales half believed, passed in silence from one cracked lip to another. But like everything in Rome, once something catches fire, it spreads fast. And this fire has a name, Spartacus. Tavros hears more now. Not from overseers who pretend nothing is happening, but from fellow slaves. Word drifts in from traveling merchants and visiting landowners. Whole cohorts sent to put the rebellion down, defeated. Armies scattered. Senators red-faced. They say Spartacus has tens of thousands with him now. 120,000, someone whispers in the vineyard, breath caught between fear and awe. Marched from Capua to the Apennines, slaughtered the legion that tried to stop them. Tavros doesn't speak, but his grip on the hoe tightens until his knuckles whiten. That night, instead of sleeping, he listens to the wind, to the soft murmurs around him, to the sound of something shifting beneath the surface of this land like a quake waiting to split the earth. In the villa, Lucia hears less, but what she hears is sharper. The master is angry. Claudia, normally composed like a statue carved from entitlement, has started snapping at the help. Lucia is ordered to pack travel bags, just in case. The family is relocating for a few weeks, perhaps to a cousin's estate farther from the city, somewhere with more walls, more distance from the whispers. But Lucia knows fear when she sees it. And this is the first time she's seen Publius afraid of anything that doesn't wear a Senate badge. Even Mira senses the change. The household is louder, tense. The baby cries more, or maybe she just notices it more. Everyone is on edge and no one will say why. Felix keeps his head down, but his ears are open. He copies another scroll, this one not for law or poetry. It's a list of troop deployments, scribbled instructions from a senator to a general. It speaks of containment, elimination, decisive force. But what sticks with him is one phrase, hastily scrawled in the margin. If he reaches Rome. No one finishes that sentence. Outside the palaces and villas, Rome still functions, barely. The market's open, bread is sold, wine flows. But there's something in the air, like a storm approaching. Everyone feels it, even if they don't know its name. And then the stories change. Spartacus is no longer just marching, he's winning. Legion after legion falls. Roads once patrolled by Roman steel now belong to men who were once chained. They say he's freeing every slave he finds, that he's burning the villas, that he's leaving messages scratched into stone walls. We were men before you made us tools. Tavros hears this last one and repeats it quietly to himself while sharpening a shovel. Not for rebellion, not yet. Just to remember. He's no fool. He knows the odds. The Romans have resources, soldiers, cruelty, and time. Spartacus has desperation, makeshift weapons, and the hope of people who forgot what hope felt like. But sometimes that's enough. In the fields, things change. Overseers glance over their shoulders more. Chains are double-checked, assignments are smaller, fewer slaves gathered in one place. It's subtle, but it's there. Severus is nervous. He tries not to show it. Still barks orders, still cracks the whip. But he doesn't leave his staff behind anymore, and when he sleeps, it's with one eye open. Lucia's villa feels like it's holding its breath. Half the servants have been sent to other estates. The ones who remain are either the most trusted or the most disposable. Lucia isn't sure which one she is. She packs another travel chest, hides another biscuit under her robe, just in case. She hasn't spoken to Felix in days, but she knows he's watching too. He always is. And then, one night, it happens. The fire reaches them. It's not Spartacus, not yet. But it's something born of him. In the countryside, 2 miles from the latifundium, a small band of slaves overpowers their guards and flees into the woods. They torch a grain store on the way out, leave behind a crude sign scrawled in charcoal, "We are not yours." The estate Tavros works on goes into lockdown. No one talks during meals. No one walks alone. Severus is furious, frantic. He orders extra patrols. Sleep is canceled. So is mercy. Tavros doesn't run, not yet. But that night he doesn't sleep either. He lies awake, listening to the footsteps outside, the sharp calls of the guards, the muttering from those too afraid to whisper. He thinks of Spartacus, thinks of the man he used to be, thinks of the man he could still become. At the villa, there's a curfew now, doors locked, lights dimmed. The master no longer holds evening meetings. The mistress stops visiting the gardens. Mira is confined to the nursery. Lucia is told not to leave the servants' quarters unless called. Felix's writing table is moved, closer to the atrium so they can keep an eye on him. No one says why, but the reason hangs in every room like thick incense. You can smell the panic. It's dressed in silk and perfume, but it's still panic. And amid all this, something strange happens. Lucia laughs. Just once. Just a breath. But it's real. She's folding a robe, perfectly as always, when Claudia snaps at her over nothing, says her sleeves are too sharp, and Lucia, she chuckles. It's soft, quiet, almost invisible. But it startles her because in that moment, for just a flicker, she isn't afraid, she's furious, and for once, that fury feels good. She stops herself, of course, regains control, keeps her head down, but something cracked. And it's not just her. Mira catches her humming again. A different song this time. Not a lullaby, a marching rhythm. Mira doesn't say anything, but she starts humming it too. Felix notices. He writes faster now, his hands shake more, but he doesn't stop because something's coming. Not just Spartacus, not just rebellion, change, and change, real change, rarely knocks politely. Next, we'll meet Spartacus himself, not the myth, not the statue, the man. It starts with stolen kitchen knives, not swords, not spears, not grand declarations, just a handful of rusted blades wrapped in cloth and tucked under beds of straw. That's how revolutions always begin, small, quiet, unimpressive, until they're not. But this is not about revolutions. Not yet. This is about a man. His name is Spartacus. You've heard of him by now, so has everyone. But forget the statues, forget the dramatic paintings and slow-motion battlefield scenes. He's not here to pose heroically in bronze. He's here to survive, and maybe, just maybe, make survival mean something. Spartacus was once a gladiator, not by choice. He didn't sign up for fame. He was captured, likely during a Roman campaign in Thrace, shipped across the sea, shackled, sold, trained to kill for entertainment. In Capua, he was supposed to die with flair, to make nobles cheer and peasants dream. But he didn't. Instead, he escaped. With 70 others, armed with kitchen knives and broken furniture, he fought his way out of the gladiator school. They took to the hills. They could have run, disappeared into the countryside, started new lives in anonymity. But Spartacus didn't run. He turned around. No one expected what came next. The man didn't just survive. He recruited, built, trained. He turned slaves, deserters, peasants, even a few free poor into something Rome hadn't seen in generations. An army without a master. And it worked. They beat a patrol, then another, then an entire legion. Word spread faster than fire in dry straw. From Sicily to the Alps, people whispered his name like a prayer. Not because they knew him, but because they needed him. Needed to believe that someone like them could do what he was doing. That maybe, just maybe, they could too. Spartacus didn't promise paradise. He didn't promise anything actually. Just a choice. Stay, fight, or die where you stand. And for thousands, that was enough. Soon his ranks swelled, not just to hundreds, not just to thousands, 120,000. That's not an army. That's a movement. And it terrified Rome, because Spartacus wasn't a barbarian. He wasn't irrational, he was methodical. He had tactics, he avoided unnecessary battles, respected discipline, took food but not vengeance, protected women, punished looters. He wasn't building a rebellion, he was building dignity. Tavros hears about all this in fragments, between shifts, between bites of moldy bread. But he's listening now, more than listening. He's calculating, watching Severus, watching the guards, watching the shadows. Lucia hears it too. Felix confirms the rumors. He saw documents, orders to double patrols on the Appian Way. Claudia receives urgent letters nearly every day now, her face souring like milk with each one. One night, she drops a scroll by accident. Lucia picks it up. She doesn't read it, but she notices the seal. Military. Urgent. Burn after reading. Claudia doesn't even thank her, and Lucia doesn't forget. In the nursery, Mira starts setting aside bits of cloth, nothing noticeable, nothing traceable, just extra rags, bandages if needed, or strips for tying things down or up. She doesn't know why she's doing it, only that she needs to. And Felix? He copies one more scroll than usual that day. Not for the master, for himself. Hidden behind an old ledger, the ink barely dry, he writes one sentence. He walks like a slave, but fights like a storm. It's about Spartacus. It's also about all of them. Rome, meanwhile, is scrambling, desperate. Publicly, they call him a nuisance, a rogue gladiator, a rural hiccup. But privately, they're moving troops, reassigning commanders, whispering in locked rooms about contingency plans and last resorts. One senator suggests fortifying the city. Another says they should negotiate. A third says they're only slaves. Kill them. They can't agree. Rome is proud, too proud, and proud men with panicked eyes make terrible decisions. Back in the latifundium, things are shifting again. Tavros is reassigned, closer to the main house, fewer tools, less open field, more surveillance. It's meant as a reward, but everyone knows what it really is. Containment. Severus walks with a limp now, he blames an accident, but the other slaves know he was jumped 2 nights ago. By who? No one saw. But they heard. And the attackers didn't take anything, except his pride. Tavros doesn't gloat. He sharpens a hoe that no longer sees much dirt, and waits. In the villa, Lucia's duties expand. She's asked to inventory supplies, food, water, fabric. She's not told why, but she counts carefully and double checks and memorizes where the knives are kept. That night in the laundry room, she meets Felix by accident, or maybe not. Neither speaks for a long time. Then he says, "If he comes, would you go?" Lucia doesn't answer, not with words, just a nod, a small one, barely there, but enough. The next day, Mira overhears a visitor talking in the atrium. A merchant, nervous. "They say he's headed north now," he mutters, "toward Rome, toward us." Claudia waves him off. "Let him come, the legions will crush him." But the merchant doesn't look so sure. Neither does Mira. She hums the marching rhythm again, softer now. Almost a lullaby, almost. Tavros hears the same rumor later that day. North, toward them, his heart skips, not in fear, in recognition. Because whether Spartacus reaches them or not, this moment, this possibility, it's already broken something open. In fields and kitchens and storerooms and scroll rooms, people are preparing, not openly, not dramatically, but they're ready. The whip no longer cracks the same way, the chain no longer feels so final. And the silence, it's filled with breath. Held, waiting. Next, we'll watch what happens when the fire finally reaches the gates. The city holds its breath. It's the kind of quiet you notice only when everything else stops, not the peaceful kind, the heavy, unnatural hush that comes before a storm. Because now, even Rome can't deny it. Spartacus is coming. Not rumors anymore, not whispers. There are sightings, an outpost ambushed south of the Appian Way, a small legion rooted outside Beneventum, supply lines cut, roads choked with refugees, landowners abandoning estates, officials relocating their families. Not fleeing, of course. Romans don't flee. They strategically withdraw. But everyone knows, it's not just a rebellion, it's a reckoning. Inside the villa, Claudia tightens her grip on everything, her tone, her servants, her jewelry. Lucia is ordered to prepare emergency bags again, but this time the list includes valuables and a dagger. Lucia doesn't ask questions. She sharpens the blade slowly, carefully, then places it inside a velvet pouch. Her fingers linger a second longer than necessary. The master, Publius, is fuming. Not at Spartacus, at the Senate, at the incompetence, at those fools who let a gladiator make Rome sweat. He orders the slaves not to gather, not to speak unless spoken to, not to breathe too loudly. Mira listens from the nursery, bouncing a now silent Gaius. The baby doesn't cry anymore. He senses it too. The shift, the tension that drips through the walls like rising smoke. Tavros feels it in the fields, or what's left of them. Half the estate's workers have vanished, some reassigned, others just gone. Whether they escaped or were executed, no one says. The vineyard looks abandoned, the olive groves untended, the soil strangely quiet. Even Severus has changed. He no longer yells, doesn't strut, doesn't even carry the staff anymore, just walks from task to task like someone counting the days backward. Tavros sees this and says nothing. But in the storeroom behind the tool shed, he's hidden 3 things: a knife, a wineskin, and a length of rope. Nothing special, just enough to start something. He's not alone. In the villa's kitchen, Mira notices fewer guards around the perimeter, fewer patrols. The city is pulling them inward, closer to Rome's heart. Out here in the countryside, they're thinning. And then, one night, it happens. Not Spartacus, not yet, but something lit by him, a fire. Literal this time. It starts at a nearby estate. No one knows who lit it, maybe a slave, maybe a rebel, maybe just lightning and coincidence. But it doesn't matter because it spreads. Through barns, through grain stores, through whispers. The flames lick the horizon red and the villa smells smoke before it sees it. Lucia is shaken awake. "Pack everything," Claudia snaps. "Now." Lucia stumbles to her feet. grabs the emergency satchel she's pre-packed 3 times already. Her hands don't shake, not this time, because this time she's ready. Felix is summoned to copy a last-minute message to a relative in the city. If the villa falls, it reads, "We go north." Felix writes the words, but he adds a dot, a small, almost invisible mark at the corner of the scroll. His own symbol. Proof, maybe, or a final act of authorship before someone else owns his body again. Mira is ordered to bundle the child. She wraps Gaius in cloth, tight but gentle. Her hands pause as she ties the knot. The fire's reflection dances in the nursery window. The guards are scrambling. A small group remains behind to hold the estate. Everyone else moves toward the carriage. Tavros sees the flickering light from the fields, smells the burn, hears the shouting. He doesn't wait for instructions. He ducks into the storeroom, grabs the knife, the wineskin, the rope, ties the cloth around his waist, and walks, not runs, toward the outer wall. No one stops him. No one even sees him. The estate is cracking, and for once, the cracks are letting people through. Lucia moves through the hallway like a ghost, one satchel in hand, the dagger strapped to her back beneath her tunic. She passes Felix in the corridor. Neither speaks, but in that glance, everything's said. The plan was never spoken aloud. It didn't need to be. The fire was always coming. All they had to do was step into it. Mira stands at the nursery doorway. The baby coos once, then goes quiet again. Mira doesn't move. She could run. She could stay. She's weighing it moment by moment as the villa around her begins to shake with movement and fear. In the chaos, one guard shouts, "They're here!" No one knows if he means slaves, rebels, or fire. It doesn't matter, because in that instant, the illusion shatters. Rome's control, its order, its gods, gone. And in the void, something else rises. Tavros slips into the trees. Lucia ducks into the wine cellar. Felix drops his pen. Mira closes her eyes, and outside, the sky glows brighter than day. But it's not sunrise. It's the end of something, or maybe the beginning. We'll see what survives the night. The fire doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care who's noble or nameless, rich or ragged. It moves with the same reckless authority that Rome once claimed for itself, consuming wood, cloth, straw, and fear in equal measure. By the time dawn breaks, the villa is unrecognizable, not destroyed, yet, but wounded. The air smells of scorched linen and panic. Horses gone, servants gone, half the guards gone. The master? Gone too. Publius left just before midnight, a satchel of coins and ego under one arm, Claudia under the other, mumbling curses at whoever let the provinces slip. They didn't look back. Lucia did. She watched from the shadow of the wine cellar as the carriage wheels dug into the road. No one noticed she wasn't with them. No one asked. They assumed she was disposable, or worse, forgotten. That suited her fine. She waits an hour, 2, until the sun is fully up and the smoke thins into sky. Then she moves. Not toward the kitchen or the courtyard, toward the north wall, where the perimeter has been left unguarded for weeks. She walks like she belongs there, because now she does. Felix is already waiting. He's dressed in rags, cleaner than usual somehow, like he chose this version of himself. He holds nothing, carries no scrolls. His hands are empty, but steady. "You stayed," Lucia says, barely audible. "I never left," he replies. Together, they slip through the wall's breach, one that Tavros found weeks ago and never told anyone about. Speaking of Tavros, he hasn't gone far. He's crouched on a slope halfway between the vineyard and the tree line, watching the sunrise paint the ruins gold. It's beautiful, in a cruel way, like Rome itself, built on bones, polished with ash. He hears them before he sees them. Footsteps. 2 sets. Lucia and Felix emerge from the orchard like figures from a dream that refused to die. He doesn't smile, but he nods, because sometimes that's louder. The 3 of them stand in the clearing, not talking, just breathing. Behind them, a world that used them, broke them, discarded them. Ahead, uncertainty, hunger, cold, maybe death, but also something else, possibility. Then a 4th figure joins, Mira. She's slower, carrying a bundle wrapped in linen. Gaius. She doesn't ask if she's welcome, she simply arrives. Tavros steps forward, takes the baby without a word, holds him like someone who's never done it before but understands that it matters. Mira exhales. For the first time in years, they don't know what comes next. No map, no allies, no guarantees. But they're not alone. That's already more than they had yesterday. By nightfall, they're deep in the forest. No roads, no signs, just instinct and silence. Lucia finds a spring. Mira gathers berries. Tavros sets traps with the rope he almost used for escape. Felix scribbles something in the dirt with a stick, then wipes it away before anyone sees. They don't talk about Spartacus. Not yet, because right now, survival is the rebellion. The act of eating without permission, sleeping without fear, dreaming without shame. They light no fire that night. Too dangerous. But the stars are bright enough to see by. Lucia lies on her back, staring upward, and whispers, "They'll come for us." Felix, next to her, replies, "Let them." In the distance, an owl calls, and for once, no one answers with a command. Morning again. Day 2 of freedom. It still doesn't feel real. Tavros is up first, checking traps. He returns with a rabbit, small, thin, but enough. Mira cooks without fire, using hot stones and patience. She hums, not a lullaby, something else, something older. Lucia sharpens the dagger, not out of fear. Habit now. Felix gathers dry bark and sketches a crude map in the soil. He's piecing together rumors, crossings, safe paths. He knows a merchant route one slaves whisper about, a trail that might lead them to others, to the movement, to Spartacus. No one says it aloud, but the idea grows, like ivy on a broken wall. By midday, they're moving north, slow but steady. They pass abandoned farms, burned wagons, signs of struggle. The war is closer now, closer than Rome wants to admit. In one village, they find a boy, barefoot, bruised, alone. He doesn't speak, but he follows. That night, they share the rabbit, split it 5 ways. Gaius gets the broth, Mira insists. Lucia watches the boy. He's maybe 10, maybe 12. It's hard to tell under the dirt. "What's your name?" she asks gently. He hesitates. Then, "Silvan." Tavros nods. "Good name." Silvan smiles for the first time. It's crooked and real. In the coming days, they'll meet others, runaways, survivors, rebels. Some speak of Spartacus like he's a god. Others, like a rumor, a shadow that fights back. They hear of battles won, forts abandoned, Roman columns forced into retreat. They hear of betrayals too, of towns that turned in slaves for coin, of traps set with promises of safety. Nothing is simple, but one thing is clear. Something is breaking. Not just walls, not just orders. The illusion that Rome is eternal, that chains are permanent, that silence is survival. Tavros no longer walks with his eyes down. Lucia no longer flinches when birds take flight. Mira sleeps beside Gaius, not guarding him, but guarding herself less. Felix no longer writes in dirt. He writes in bark now, in ink stolen from an abandoned cart. He's keeping a record, not of laws, but of lives, real ones, flawed, fierce, free. They still don't say Spartacus, but they no longer need to, because they've become the proof he exists. They are the movement now. And movements, once started, are hard to stop. Next time, we'll see what happens when Rome tries. They reach the crossroads on the 7th day, not marked on any map, not etched in stone, but unmistakable. It's where the brush clears, the trees part, and the dirt path splits 3 ways. One leads east toward the mountains, another south back toward the coast and all the things they left behind. The third, north. No signs, just tracks, fresh ones, dozens of feet, some barefoot, others wrapped in cloth or broken sandals. The ground churned with recent movement, and among those prints, something carved into the trunk of a cypress tree. A handprint, crude, burned in with ash and sap, but clear. A symbol they've seen before, in stories and murmurs, in Felix's scribbles. It's the sign of Spartacus, no fanfare, no trumpet blast, just a tree in the forest saying, "This way." They stand in silence. Then Tavros moves first, no words, just action. The others follow, because this isn't a debate. It never was. The land changes. It's harsher now, colder. The terrain rises, dips, twists, less forgiving, more remote. They're not just hiding from soldiers anymore. They're heading towards something. Signs begin to appear. Charcoal markings on stone walls, broken chains hanging from tree branches, campfire rings, cold but fresh. And then, voices. The first encounter is almost a disaster. Lucia spots movement in the woods. 4 figures armed with clubs and spears crouching low. She signals Tavros, who signals the others. Everyone freezes. It could be Legion scouts, could be bounty hunters, could be worse, but one figure calls out, not in Latin, in Thracian, a name: Spartacus. They lower their weapons. The strangers do the same. Minutes later, they're sitting by a shared fire. A proper one this time, hot, bright, defiant. The newcomers are escaped slaves too. One was a cook, another a quarry worker, the third, a former arena usher who snuck out during a festival and never returned. They're heading the same way. There are hundreds ahead, they say, maybe thousands, forming, training, waiting. Spartacus is real, alive, preparing something big, a final march toward Rome itself. Lucia doesn't flinch at the idea anymore. She leans into it, like warmth. Mira feeds Gaius a piece of boiled root and hums. Felix carves the handprint into his notebook. Tavros watches the fire, not for threats, for meaning, because now they're not just surviving, they're arriving. The camp comes into view on the 10th night. Not a camp, really. A city made of cloth and ash. Tents stretched across a plateau, carts piled high with food, weapons, and bandages, men sharpening blades, women weaving rope, children chasing each other between sleeping rolls. It's not organized like a Roman army, it's looser, louder, real. And every person there has a story etched into their spine. They walk in slowly, no one stops them, because no one here has the right to turn anyone away. A boy with a missing ear points them to a cluster of tents near the olive trees. Fresh arrivals sleep there, he says, chewing an apple. Tavros nods. Lucia thanks him. The boy tosses her another apple. First good sleep in months, he adds. He's not wrong. The bedding is rough, the air thin, the noise constant. But they sleep that night without a single jolt. No one jerks awake at the sound of a snapped twig. No one checks for patrols. No one dreams of chains. The next day, they see him, Spartacus. He's not on a stage, not barking orders. He's lifting a crate, shoulder first, sweat-soaked, barefoot. He's shorter than Tavros expected. Older. Face like sandpaper, and eyes like storm clouds that haven't rained in years. But he moves like someone who already decided what comes next. No speeches, just motion. Tavros watches from a distance. Lucia does too. Felix writes nothing that day. Mira sings softly as Gaius naps, but stops when Spartacus passes within 10 feet of her. He nods. Once, she nods back. That's it, and it's enough. Because here, titles mean nothing, backgrounds mean nothing. The only thing that matters, what you're willing to do next. They're assigned duties. Felix to the writing tent, helping draft letters, logistics, coordinates. Turns out, rebels still need paperwork. Lucia joins a team distributing supplies. She tracks who has boots, who needs cloaks, who's missing meals. It's hard, fast, chaotic, and she thrives. Tavros trains. Blunt weapons at first, then real ones. Not to conquer, to defend. He's paired with a man from Numidia who used to break horses. They don't speak the same language, but after 2 hours sparring, they know enough. Mira helps in the infirmary, not because she's told to, because she's good at it. Bandages, splints, calming people. She hums as she works. Even Gaius has a place, carried on backs, cooed over by every third rebel, fed more than he's ever been. This isn't comfort. This is purpose. It doesn't heal everything, but it starts something. One night, around the fire, they speak of what comes next. Spartacus is planning a move. They'll head north again, toward the Alps, toward freedom. Truly this time, they could escape, scatter, start new lives. It's what Spartacus wanted from the start. But many want to turn back south, to Rome, not for conquest, for message, to show the world that chains don't break people. People break chains. Lucia asks Tavros what he thinks. He doesn't answer right away. Then he says, if we leave now, we survive. Felix adds, if we stay, we matter. And Mira, she just whispers, we're already free. No decision is made that night, but in the morning, everyone sharpens their blades anyway, just in case. The wind changes first, not the direction, the feeling, like something watching from just beyond the tree line. It's subtle. First, the way conversations drop when strangers approach, the way guards check their weapons, twice instead of once. Then come the rumors. 3 scouts missing near the river, a patrol attacked at dusk, a merchant wagon found overturned bones, picked clean, but not by animals. Someone's out there. and it's not Spartacus. The camp tightens, not with orders, but with instinct. People walk closer to the fires. Weapons are kept within reach of enduring sleep. Children are told not to wander. The laughter that once echoed between tents gets quieter. Tavros sharpens his blades lower now, less out of caution, more out of thought. Lucia counts supplies again, this time mentally tracing where she'd hide them if they had to leave fast. Felix writes shorter sentences, fewer flourishes, more facts. Mira watches the trees more than the sky. Even Gaius senses it, stops babbling. Then it happens. Note a battle and arrival. A single man limping into camp. Pat-dawn blood crusted on his tunic, his eyes wild. He doesn't speak at first, just collapses near the outer ring of tents. When he wakes, she says one word, Romans. He was part of a scouting party. He says they were tracking movements near the western ridge. They saw something they weren't supposed to. And now, he's the only one left. Spartacus listens, says nothing, then doubles the guard, not out of fear, out of principle. 2 nights later, another body is found, this one inside the perimeter. Now, upon non-note, just silence and the unsettling act that noon saw with Appin. The camp doesn't panic, but it tightens further, less singing, less light, more eyes on the shadows. Lucia patrols the outer edge with 2 others. Now they carry spears not for practice, for purpose. Tavros volunteers for night watch. Mira sleeps with a knife under her blanket. Felix copies a list of names, silently deleting one each morning just in case one reaching him. Then a meeting is called. Spartacus stands at the center, not raised, note levated, just surrounded, no speech. Norley, just truth. They know we're here, he's a. Swek knew we do not fear them, but we will not wait for them. May their murmurs ripple, half the camp wants to move north. Plans slip through the Alps, vanish into the wind. But in other voices, peaks louder, a woman, older, her face carved by time and grief. We're in before, she says, they chased, we hide. They hunted, this time we fight. A murmur becomes a chant, then silence, not fear, this time decision. The next day is preparation. Weapons cleaned, armor reinforced, food ration shaved. They're not marching for freedom. Now, they're marchi, end for a message Felix calls at the long and sore. To a question Rome should never have asked. What happens when the broken remember they were whole? Lucia tightens her boots for the first time in years. Tavros stees his blade with a new strip of cloth from Mira's stores. Felix writes a single sentence on a piece of bark, burnt this before battle. He hands it to Mira. She doesn't read it, just nods. They move before sunrise. Columns, loose, flexible, quiet. Note an army, a force, a statement. Children and Elde are let's stay behind, guarded, protected, not forgotten. Spartacus walks at the center, no banners, no horn. Just presence. They walk for hours, insolence, then reach the hill on the other side, a Roman column. 200 soldiers, heavy armor, perfect formation, silent efficiency. The contrast is staggering. One side trained, drilled deadly, the other wild, mixed, uncertain, but only one side has something to prove. Spartacus steps forward, not to parley, to be seen. The Roman commander doesn't react at first, then halofs. A short sound, sharp A, and dry, then gives the signal. The battle begins. It's not neat, not poetic. It's chaos, dust, blood roars. Tavros swings like a man droning and fighting the sea at the same time. Lucia's dagger finds a gap between plates, then another myriad keeps a boy alive long enough to throw a second stone. Felix throws into an officer's eyes, then tackles him over edge. Gaius screams from the edge, note in fear and fury. They lose people, good ones, fast stones, but they don't lose the battle. Somehow through grit and madness and sheer refusal to die, they break the Roman line. The commander falls hard and alone. His last words aren't the ard. Because Noon's listening, the field goes quiet, not peaceful. Spartacus doesn't cheer. Hec kneels beside a fallen boy and closes eyes. Then stands, we move before nightfall. No victory feast, no speeches, just breath and forward. Always forward. They walk insolence, nongs, no stories, no boasting, only footsteps. The sound of bodies still echoing from a battle that should have ended them, but didn't. Not because they were stronger, because they refused to be erased. The field behind them is stained with proof, and the road ahead is uncertain. But they walk anyway. Lucia feels it in her legs, not the paint-he memory of running for someone else's gain. Now every step is her own. Mira carries Gaius again, high-sheavier but lighter than the fear she used to live with. Tavros says nothing, his knuckles bruised, his blade chipped, but still sharp. Felix hums under his breath, note a tune, our rhythm. The beat of survival turned into purpose, slurk. They pass through a burned or charred fruit trees, blackened, ash rising like ghosts in the wind. A killed in the camp asks, were these seal ways dead? Someone answers, no, Rome made them that way. They keep moving. The next village they reach is empty, not destroyed, just gone. Doors open, plates on tables, no people. As if everyone stood up a Tonsen way, elked away, Spartacus sends scouts, 2 don't return. The 3rd brings news our man detachment passed through. Took everyone not as prisoners, ace examples. The camp holds its breath again, but this time they don't tremble. They sharpen. Lucia helps build barricades, not because she was told to, because she saw where the gaps were. Mira organizes food rations. Gaius helps mostly by staying in one place. Tavros teaches 2 younger men how to hold a blade, not swing it, just hold it, like it belongs in their hand. Felix writes another line in Nay, is book is short, where not symbols, where consequences, score fork. That night, the wind howls, trees bend, tents flap, but noon leaves, they sit closer to the fires. Sharing stories now, quiet ones of mothers of songs of noon Elsa remembers. Lucia speaks of her brother, Tavros of a village that no longer exists on any map. Mira hums Sagan, the lullaby this time, and Gaius falls asleep with a smile. Felix just listens, he writes nothing, because some things are meant to be kept. At dawn a scout returns bar, Aethelus not Romans something else, a caravan heading toward them fast but disorganized, no banners, no formation. Spartacus gives a single nod, wait. They wait, the sun rises higher, and then the caravan appears, 36 people, exhausted eyes, dust-covered but alive. They are survivors from a southern farm, abandoned by its owners, raided by soldiers. They escaped, barely among them, 2 brothers with burns, a pregnant woman, a blind man guided by a child. They are taken in without question. Noon asks their story, they already know it. It is everyone's story. Lucia finds Sagirl with a broken sandal, she fixes it. Tavros gives his spare cloak to a man missing half his teeth. Mira tends to the pregnant woman. And Felix he writes again, Alice this time names of offerings, shelter given, bread shared, weapons mended, proof that rebellion is not destruction, it is reconstruction. By the 4th day, the camp has doubled, note in numbers. In resolve, they start training all of them, event the old, event the wounded, not for battle, for dignity. To remember their bodies belong to them and that they can still stand, even after everything skokacking. The nun night, a flare of panic, smoke on the horizon. Southwest scout confirms that Rome is burning another estate, one that used to feed 3 villages. Spartacus watches the sky, the flames far but loud. He says nothing for hours. Then finally we go north as planned, but we do not forget. Everyone nods. Noon argues, because this is no longer about winning. It is about refusing to vanish. They break camp of First Light. Lucia at the front now, not because she's stronger, because she knows where the traps are. Tavros flanks the left side. Miraguard's there. Felix walks at the center, still scribbling, still chronicling, still making sure the world will remember. They pass another marker, another burned handprint on a tree, this one larger, fresher, a sign. Had passed here. They're close. No cheers, just a deep breath. Because now they know this isn't the end, it's the march between battles, the inhale before the shout. They don't know what waits beyond the nexter edge, but they walk a sun, because when Rome lit the match, they didn't expect the fire to walk back. They don't stop moving, not because they're being chased, but because standing still feels wrong now. Motion has become survival, a ritual of reclaiming what was stolen. The path north winds through narrow valleys, colder now, sharper with stone. Trees thin, the soil turns pale, but they keep walking. Each day begins the same, a shared silence, a cold meal, and the steady beat of footsteps. Each night ends the same, shoulders close together, blades nearby, eyes watching the dark. Tavros walks ahead with a new sense of purpose. He no longer glances back to see if the others are following. He knows they are. He can feel them behind him. Lucia's steady rhythm, Mira's soft words to Gaius, Felix scribbling with chalk on bark as they go. They reach a plateau on the 5th day. Below them, smoke rises, not from fire, but from cooking, warmth, people. Another camp, not rebels this time, refugees, families who didn't fight, couldn't, just ran, hoping someone like Spartacus might clear a way forward. The camp is makeshift, blankets over sticks, wagons turned sideways to block wind, children curled up in corners of the earth. They're not warriors, but they're part of this all the same. Lucia is the first to move. She kneels beside an old woman struggling to light a fire and offers flint. No words, just help. Mira follows, giving the last of her dried fruit to a mother too thin to nurse. Tavros gives them his silence. Not because he has nothing to offer, but because sometimes quiet is the kindest thing a man can give. That night, they share space, no speeches, just warmth. Felix writes another line, short and jagged. We are not the army. We are the reason the army matters. Morning brings a choice. Spartacus has moved again, further north, deeper into the mountains. The trail is harder, the air colder. Word is the Senate has dispatched a new general, a brutal one, efficient. No interest in capturing, only killing. The rebels gather in a clearing before dawn. The group has grown again, scattered fighters, old allies, new volunteers. Tavros stands near the edge, scanning faces. Some are familiar now, some are not. But all of them are the same in one way. They have nothing left to lose. Spartacus doesn't make a speech, that's not his way. He raises a hand, points north, and says, "The line ends when we stop walking." It's enough. They move. The ascent begins. The terrain becomes cruel. Thin air, loose stone, cliffs that look down like judges. But still, they climb. Carrying children, wounds each other. Lucia slips once. Tavros catches her without a word. Felix starts coughing, dry, raw. Mira gives him a rag soaked in herbs and keeps walking. At the top of one ridge, they pause. Below them, Rome. Not the heart of it, but close enough to smell the wealth in the wind. Marble roofs, smoke from heated baths, banners flapping like victory is a permanent condition. No one says anything, but everyone thinks the same thing. So much luxury, so little soul. They don't descend, not yet. Instead, they set camp just above the city's reach. It's not strategy, it's defiance. The fires they build are visible from the nearest villa. So are the banners they raise, scraps of cloth, each marked with one handprint, burned black. They don't hide, they wait. And sure enough, Rome answers. The answer arrives at sunset, dust first, kicked up along the eastern road like a warning. Then the gleam of metal, shields, helmets, spears, catching the last light of day like a blade slicing sky. The formation is tight, no wasted steps, no hesitation, Roman discipline. Even from a distance it radiates, 200 men, maybe more. Well-fed, well-armed, and led by a commander who doesn't wear the ornate armor of parade generals. His gear is scarred, practical, used. A man who fights in the front, not from a scroll. They stop just outside of reach. Not far enough to attack, not far enough to ignore. For hours, nothing moves. Spartacus doesn't order a charge, he doesn't even stand. He sits by the fire, sharpening a blade, letting the waiting work for him. Tavros watches from a ridge, his pulse isn't racing. That surprises him. He thought it would be, but this isn't fear, this is clarity. Lucia sits beside him, dagger in her lap. They won't talk first, she says. No, Tavros agrees, they want us to blink. Below, the Romans begin to set up camp, methodical, quiet, confident. The rebels do the same. But there's no comparison. One side has structure, the other has nothing but grit. And still, no one flinches. At midnight, the silence is broken. A single torch approaches from the Roman side. A rider, slow, deliberate, unarmed. The camp stirs, weapons lifted, eyes narrowed. Spartacus steps forward, calm as a man answering the door. The rider dismounts. A messenger, young, face too smooth to have seen real battle. He hands over a scroll, bows, and rides away without speaking. Spartacus breaks the seal, reads, then burns it without a word. Felix, watching nearby, approaches. What did it say? Spartacus answers without turning. They offer surrender, promise leniency. Do you believe them? He finally looks up. No. Dawn arrives cold and fast. The Romans are in formation before the rebels finish eating. Shields locked, spears angled, the classic wall of conquest. The rebels? Scattered lines, a few groups of 10, some with swords, others with farm tools and bent metal. No armor, no uniform, but eyes full of something Rome never trained against. Rage, purpose, memory. Spartacus raises a hand, no speech, just a gesture, and they move. The clash. The clash is thunder. Metal against wood, skin against dirt, breath against death. Tavros charges straight into a shield wall, breaks a spear with his shoulder, drops a soldier with one swing. He doesn't feel the blade that grazes his thigh. Not yet. Lucia weaves through chaos, her knife finding gaps, her mind sharper than any weapon. She moves like a shadow, quiet and lethal. Mira stays behind the line, pulling the wounded to safety and wrapping limbs, pressing cloth to wounds. Her hands never shake. Felix doesn't fight, he watches, then writes. carving words into bark between moments of silence and screams, because someone must remember. They don't win quickly. Rome doesn't break easily, but by noon, the tide shifts. One Roman line falters, then another. The commander holds them together for a while, barking orders, rallying men, pushing forward. But Spartacus is already there, not waiting, not watching, fighting. He meets the commander near the center of the field. No ceremony, just steel. The clash is short, brutal, and ends with one man standing. It's not the general. The Romans retreat, not in chaos, in defeat, orderly but undeniable. The rebels don't chase. Spartacus doesn't allow it. We don't hunt, he says, we endure. That night, the camp doesn't celebrate. They bury the dead. There we go. 17 by Lucia's count, 34 by Mira's. Tavros digs without stopping. He knows some of the names, others he learns as he lowers the bodies. Felix writes each one down. No titles, just names, because that's what Rome always took first. Identity. And now they give it back. In the quiet, Gaius finally speaks. Just one word. Mama. Mira cries, not loudly, just enough. The fire burns lower than usual. No songs, no chants. But something has shifted. They didn't just survive, they pushed Rome back. Not forever, but enough. Enough to prove this wasn't luck, this was choice. Spartacus walks the perimeter alone, passing tents, faces, wounds. He doesn't speak, doesn't smile. But when he reaches Felix, he stops. What did you write? He asks. Felix shows him the bark. It says, they bled and Rome blinked. Spartacus nods once and walks on. They don't stop moving, not because they're being chased, but because standing still feels wrong now. Motion has become survival, a ritual of reclaiming what was stolen. The path north winds through narrow valleys, colder now, sharper with stone. Trees thin, the soil turns pale, but they keep walking. Each day begins the same. A shared silence, a cold meal, and the steady beat of footsteps. Each night ends the same, shoulders close together, blades nearby, eyes watching the dark. Tavros walks ahead with a new sense of purpose. He no longer glances back to see if the others are following. He knows they are. He can feel them behind him. Lucia's steady rhythm, Mira's soft words to Gaius, Felix scribbling with chalk on bark as they go. They reach a plateau on the 5th day. Below them, smoke rises, not from fire, but from cooking, warmth, people. Another camp. Not rebels this time. Refugees. Families who didn't fight. Couldn't. Just ran, hoping someone like Spartacus might clear a way forward. The camp is makeshift. Blankets over sticks, wagons turned sideways to block wind, children curled up in corners of the earth. They're not warriors, but they're part of this all the same. Lucia is the first to move. She kneels beside an old woman struggling to light a fire and offers flint. No words, just help. Mira follows, giving the last of her dried fruit to a mother too thin to nurse. Tavros gives them his silence, not because he has nothing to offer, but because sometimes quiet is the kindest thing a man can give. That night, they share space. No speeches, just warmth. Felix writes another line, short and jagged. We are not the army, we are the reason the army matters. Morning brings a choice. Spartacus has moved again. Further north, deeper into the mountains, the trail is harder, the air colder. Word is the Senate has dispatched a new general, a brutal one, efficient. No interest in capturing, only killing. The rebels gather in a clearing before dawn. The group has grown again, scattered fighters, old allies, new volunteers. Tavros stands near the edge, scanning faces. Some are familiar now, some are not. But all of them are the same in one way. They have nothing left to lose. Spartacus doesn't make a speech. That's not his way. He raises a hand, points north, and says, the line ends when we stop walking. It's enough. They move. The ascent begins. The terrain becomes cruel. Thin air, loose stone, cliffs that look down like judges, but still, they climb. Carrying children, wounds each other. Lucia slips once. Tavros catches her without a word. Felix starts coughing, dry, raw. Mira gives him a rag soaked in herbs and keeps walking. At the top of one ridge, they pause. Below them, Rome. Not the heart of it, but close enough to smell the wealth in the wind. Marble roofs, smoke from heated baths, banners flapping like victory is a permanent condition. No one says anything, but everyone thinks the same thing. So much luxury, so little soul. They don't descend, not yet. Instead, they set camp just above the city's reach. It's not strategy, it's defiance. The fires they build are visible from the nearest villa. So are the banners they raise, scraps of cloth, each marked with one handprint, burned black. They don't hide, they wait. And sure enough, Rome answers. They leave the village before first light, slipping between broken doorways and shattered fences like ghosts carrying memory instead of chains. The path ahead is steep, narrowing into a trail where only one can pass at a time. No one complains. They know by now that hardship is the tax of freedom, and every step up this hill buys them more than just elevation. It buys them distance from the old world. The climb is brutal. Loose rock tumbles beneath their feet. The wind bites harder here, sharper, unfiltered. Tavros leads, his injured leg wrapped tighter now, the pain dulled by motion. Behind him, Lucia watches the trail with a keen eye, checking for signs of pursuit. There are none, but it doesn't stop her from looking. Old instincts die last. Felix walks near the rear of the line, a small bundle of bark and charcoal tucked into his coat. Every now and then, he stops and carves a phrase into a tree trunk. Nothing grand, just fragments. A word, a symbol, a direction. Markers for anyone behind them, anyone still searching. Mira carries Gaius on her back, his head resting against her shoulder. He sleeps through the worst of the climb, one hand curled into her braid like a tether. By midday, the trees return, thick pines, dark and tall, offering shelter from the sun but not the cold. They pause briefly to drink, to breathe. The silence is different here, not heavy with dread, but alive with possibilities. Tavros turns to the others and nods toward a flat stretch ahead. A good place to stop. They set camp without orders. They've become practiced at survival, each one moving with purpose, unspoken and sure. As night falls, the wind begins to howl through the branches. Mira wraps Gaius in a wool cloak and holds him close. Lucia sharpens her blade by the fire. Felix writes. Always writing. He's working on something longer now. Not just names, not just events. A record, a beginning. He doesn't know if anyone will ever read it, but he writes anyway. Spartacus joins them after nightfall. No dramatic entrance, no speech. He sits near the fire, pulls off his boots, and begins rubbing his feet. The act is so ordinary that for a moment, it disarms everyone. Then he looks around the fire, his eyes scanning the faces that remain. Tired, yes. Scarred, hungry, worn, but unbroken. We'll reach the pass in 2 days, he says. After that, the snow. No one reacts with fear. They already know. The Alps are a gate, but not one opened freely. They'll lose more. To the cold, to the climb, maybe to pursuit. But on the other side, maybe freedom. Real freedom. Not hiding in forests. Not waiting for Rome's next move. Something clean, new. A life beyond survival. Mira speaks first. Do you believe they'll follow us into the mountains? Spartacus stares into the fire. They'll follow us anywhere, but they don't know how to live where we're going. Lucia leans forward. And if we can't either, then we die as free people, Tavros answers. It isn't melodrama, it's fact. And somehow that honesty makes the fire burn warmer. Felix breaks the silence with a story, not of war, of a man he once met who kept bees in the city. The man was born a slave, sold 3 times, and still managed to carve out a corner of peace with nothing but patience and smoke. I think about him, Felix says, when I wonder what this is all for. Mira smiles. I hope there are bees in the Alps. There's laughter then. Real, full, surprising. A ripple that breaks through the cold and fear. For one moment, they are not rebels or fugitives. They are people around a fire, daring to imagine spring. The next morning, the sky is clear. They wake early, eat what little they have, and begin again. Tavros walks without limping now, or perhaps he hides it better. Lucia scouts ahead, her eyes always forward. Felix plants another message in the dirt as they leave camp. A spiral etched with a small handprint at its center. A sign that someone made it this far. A sign that someone dared to keep going. They climb steadily through the afternoon. By evening, snow begins to fall. Soft, harmless at first, then heavier. They don't stop. Not yet. They need to reach the ridge before full dark. The cold sharpens their movements, keeps them alert. The trail narrows further, flanked by cliffs that drop into clouds. One misstep could end everything. Still, they press on. When they reach the ridge, it is almost night. They collapse where they stand, breath steaming, bodies shaking. There's no fire this time, only shared blankets, shared warmth. Spartacus moves through the camp, checking on each group, laying a hand on shoulders, offering a nod or a word. He reaches Felix last. "Write this down," Spartacus says. "Not what we've done, what we still mean to do." Felix doesn't ask what that is, he already knows. By morning, the snow is deeper, not a dusting this time, a thick, silent blanket that swallows footprints as fast as they're made. The camp stirs slowly, bodies emerging from the white as if reborn. Every breath turns to steam, every step a negotiation with ice. But no one turns back. They've passed the point where retreat is even possible. Behind them lies only Rome. Ahead, the uncertain promise of the Alps. Tavros wakes with his shoulders stiff and his joints aching. The cut on his thigh has begun to freeze at the edges, slowing the bleeding but numbing more than just his skin. Still, he rises, shoulders his pack, and moves with the others. It's not pride that keeps him upright. It's momentum, the deep animal understanding that stopping is worse. Lucia walks ahead, breaking the path through the snow, her boots soaked, her dagger tucked into her belt like a memory she refuses to drop. She doesn't look back. Not because she doesn't care, but because she knows everyone will follow. They have no choice, and neither does she. Felix has wrapped his hands in strips of cloth. The ink is frozen, the bark too stiff to carve. But still, he carries the record tucked inside his coat like a second heart. Every now and then, he murmurs the lines to himself, memorizing them. The rebels have walked out of history's margins and into its center, and he refuses to let them vanish into snow. Mira is quieter now. Gaius clings to her chest beneath layers of wool and linen, warm only because she holds him close and refuses to let him feel the wind. She hums still, but the tune is slower, lower, a rhythm just beneath breath. She's not singing to calm him anymore. She's singing to keep them both human. They walk all day, climbing higher, the slope unrelenting. The trees grow sparse. The air turns thin, dry, sharp. Even the sky feels heavy, gray and low, like it's watching, waiting. They find no animals, no birds, just rock, snow, and the long exhale of winter. Near dusk, a storm rolls in. No lightning, just wind, violent, invisible, brutal. It screams across the ridge, pushing them sideways, lifting powder into their eyes, their mouths, their lungs. For a terrifying moment, the path vanishes beneath white. Visibility shrinks to a few feet, shapes blur. Spartacus calls for them to stop, to cluster together. They huddle in a rough ring, backs to the wind, bodies shielding the weakest. No fire, no warmth, just each other. Mira curls around Gaius. Tavros throws a cloak over two boys who barely look old enough to carry swords. Felix presses himself between Lucia and a rock wall, shivering violently but still whispering lines of memory. The storm lasts hours. It doesn't ease. It just passes. When silence returns, it's not relief, it's exhaustion. They sleep where they stand. When they wake, two are missing, a man and a girl. No one knows when they slipped away, whether the wind took them or they simply lay down and didn't get up. Spartacus doesn't speak their names. He doesn't need to. The others remember. By noon, they reach a narrow pass between two peaks, a knife-edge trail that seems less like a path and more like an accusation. The drop on either side is sheer. The snow has crusted over it, hiding where it ends. One wrong step is enough. Lucia goes first. She ties a rope around her waist and anchors it to a dead tree. Tavros follows next, then Mira, then Felix. Gaius makes no sound. The cold has taken the words from him. Still, he clings. It takes an hour to cross the ridge. Every step is deliberate, every breath visible. When the last foot touches solid rock again, no one cheers. No one even speaks. They're too aware of what could have happened, what nearly did. But then, something new. Below them, far off, a valley, green somehow. Not lush, but not dead. A river winds through it, partially frozen. Smoke curls from a chimney, just one, but enough to mean life. They descend slowly, carefully, as if afraid the vision will vanish if they rush. It doesn't. The trees return first, low, stunted pines bent by wind, then the sounds, distant water, a hawk cry, wind moving through brush instead of snow. At the edge of the valley, they find the cabin. Abandoned, but sturdy. Someone left it months ago, maybe longer. Inside, a hearth, a broken chair, a pile of firewood buried beneath a tarp. They don't claim it, they repair it. Lucia and Mira patch the windows. Tavros reinforces the door. Felix builds the fire. And Spartacus? He stands at the doorway looking out, not in, watching the trail, as if daring Rome to try again. They don't say the word safe, not yet. Not ever, maybe. But for the first time, the night comes without fear. The fire crackles, the snow melts from their clothes. And when Gaius laughs, a real laugh, it echoes through the cabin like the first sign of spring. The cabin becomes something they hadn't expected. A pause. Not an end, not a victory, but a breath drawn in after too many exhaled on the run. They don't know how long they'll stay. A night, perhaps. A few days, if Rome is slow to notice their trail. But for now, it is enough to be warm. Enough to hear nothing but fire and wind, and the quiet shuffle of tired feet finding places to rest. The rebels move carefully, as though afraid any sudden gesture will shatter the fragile stillness they've found. Tavros takes the first watch. He doesn't need to be asked. He sits just beyond the door, one arm around his knees, the other holding the handle of a blade he no longer polishes. It's seen too much for shine. He listens to the wind, the crackle of logs, the soft murmur of Mira speaking to Gaius in the corner. The boy is finally asleep, breath even, hands twitching in dreams that hopefully carry less weight than the world he's lived through. Mira hasn't slept in 2 days, but she smiles now and then when she thinks no one is looking. Lucia spends the night tending to the wounded. Nothing major, bruises, frostbite, a twisted ankle, but she treats each one like a king. Maybe because for the first time, they're not being rushed. She can clean a wound without worrying about arrows flying. She can sew a split boot without hearing marching feet behind her. She moves like a woman remembering who she was before fear made her faster. Felix has claimed a corner of the cabin where the wind doesn't reach. He has unwrapped the scrolls, the bark slates, the torn pieces of cloth he's used for weeks to keep track of every step, every name, every fall. Tonight, he organizes, copies, rewrites. What began as a scattered collection of survival notes is becoming something larger. A story, maybe. A record. A kind of truth no empire can burn. Spartacus says little. He sharpens a small axe beside the fire and looks out the window as if expecting the mountains to speak. He's not restless, but he's not settled either. He doesn't believe in rest. Not yet. He knows Rome is not a snake that sleeps. It coils, waits, then strikes again with precision. He doesn't say any of this aloud. He doesn't need to. Everyone here understands that peace is not a promise. It's a delay. The next morning, the world is different. Not warmer, but brighter. The sky is blue for the first time in weeks, stretching wide and cloudless above the valley like a gift. Birds return. Not many, but enough to remind them that the world isn't only war. Lucia steps out early, breath fogging, boots crunching fresh snow, and lets the sun hit her face. She closes her eyes, just for a moment, just long enough to pretend. Mira washes clothes in the river that cuts through the woods, her hands red from cold but steady. She hums again, the same tune. She always returns to it. Felix asks her what the song means once. She answers, "It was my mother's. I never knew the words." And then she keeps humming. By midday, they've built more than they planned. A lean-to for firewood, a small pit for cooking, a lookout post among the trees. They don't speak of permanence, but their hands act like they might stay longer. They even joke quietly. Someone mentions planting something in the thaw. Someone else finds an old shovel behind the cabin and calls it a relic. For a moment, it feels absurd to laugh, and then it feels necessary. That evening, they light a fire outside, not to cook, to gather. They form a rough circle, backs to the cold, faces to the flame, and slowly, stories begin to surface. Not of Rome, not of rebellion, of before. Tavros speaks of his sister. She died long before chains, but he still sees her in every act of defiance. Lucia talks about a meal she once stole and how it tasted better than anything she ever earned. Mira tells the story of Gaius's birth, how quiet he was, how he looked like he knew everything already. Felix reads a passage from his journal, and when he finishes, no one claps. They just sit in silence, letting the words settle like snow. Spartacus doesn't speak. But when the fire dims and everyone begins to drift towards sleep, he remains behind, watching the embers, thinking not of Rome, but of tomorrow, of how many more mornings like this might still be possible, of what it would take to protect one. Later, as the stars rise and the wind softens and the last of the rebels find their rest, Felix rolls over and whispers into the dark, "We are not free yet, but we're somewhere Rome never imagined we could reach." They stay longer than expected. One night turns into 2, then into 3. Not because they forget the war, but because even fighters need to breathe. The valley holds them like a parent might, a firm embrace, cold but honest, and just gentle enough not to crush them. Time begins to soften. The urgency that's lived in their bones for months now eases, though it never quite leaves. They wake slower, speak more, and begin to look each other in the eye again. Not to measure trust, but to remember they're still human. Tavros uses the days to heal. The wound on his leg closes awkwardly, the skin stiff and shiny, but it holds. He practices walking again without a limp, carving a short trail in the snow behind the cabin with his repetitive pacing. He doesn't need to move. He needs to prove he still can. On the third morning, Lucia joins him, not to speak, just to walk beside him 2 lines in the snow instead of 1. And she doesn't say anything when he stumbles once. She just stops with him, waits, and starts again. Mira has become the valley's pulse. She wakes before the others to boil water, to clean cuts, to check supplies. She's begun teaching some of the children how to brew herbal remedies from bark and pine needles. Gaius follows her everywhere now, a permanent shadow with sticky fingers and wide eyes. He doesn't speak much, but he watches everything. Mira says he's learning more than they think. "He'll remember this," she tells Felix one night. "Even if we don't make it, he will." Felix spends his days on the hill behind the cabin. From there, he can see both the valley floor and the ridge trail they came from. He writes for hours, scribbling without stopping, capturing names, phrases, gestures. He records Lucia's habit of tapping her knife when she's thinking, Tavros's way of cracking his knuckles when cold, Mira's song, Spartacus's silences. He doesn't know who he's writing for anymore. A reader, a witness, a future that may never come, but he writes anyway, because if they vanish, he wants the world to know they were here. Spartacus has grown quieter, if such a thing were possible. He spends most of his time near the river, sharpening stones into blades, not because they lack weapons, but because his hands can't be idle. He checks the perimeter each evening, alone, tracing invisible lines between trees, listening for the forest's shift. Once, Felix asked him what he's looking for. Spartacus replied, "Proof we're not dreaming." Then he walked away. On the 5th day, a scout returns, not from their group, from the south. A boy, no older than 12, half-starved, frostbitten hands. He carries no message, no banner, just breathless news. Rome has found the trail. 2 legions, maybe more, advancing north. They're not subtle, they don't need to be. Their armor makes the snow hiss when it lands. Spartacus listens, nods, thanks the boy, and gives him food. Then he turns to the others and speaks 5 words. We leave at first light. No one argues, not because they're ready, because they have to be. That night, the fire burns lower, packs are checked, boots relaced, the cabin is cleaned, not out of sentiment, but out of respect. Felix tucks his writings into a leather pouch. Mira prepares dried herbs for the road. Lucia maps their route with a piece of coal and a flat stone. Tavros sharpens his blade for the last time, not because it's dull, because it's ritual. Before they sleep, Spartacus gathers them once more outside. Snow falls gently, not enough to blind, just enough to remind. He says nothing at first, just looks at each of them like he's measuring something deep inside their bones. Then, finally, he says, if we die tomorrow, let it be after doing something Rome will never forget. That's all. That's enough. At dawn they go. The path north cuts deeper into the mountains, winding through cliffs and ravines that look more like scars than trails. They move in silence, every breath a fog, every step a decision. The cold is different now, less a chill, more a presence. Like the mountain itself is testing them. Halfway through the day, the snow begins again. Not gentle, relentless. Visibility drops, the wind screams. They press on anyway. By nightfall, they reach a ridge that overlooks a narrow valley. Below, movement. Torches, a Roman column winding through the pass. Too close, too organized. There's no more time to hide. They prepare quickly. No banners, no speeches, just readiness. Tavros takes the front line. Lucia flanks left with a dozen others. Mira stays back with the wounded, with Gaius. Felix doesn't write this time. He joins the line with a rusted spear and shaking hands. Spartacus moves through them like a ghost made of flame, eyes lit not with anger but with purpose. And as the Romans begin to climb, as their armor clinks and their boots break the snow, Spartacus raises his arm, then drops it. The rebels charge. They strike like weather, sudden, wild, without warning. The snow muffles the first cries, deadens the clash of iron against bone, but it cannot hide the violence. From the ridge, the rebels fall upon the Roman column with no formation, no banners, only the sheer force of need. It is not the kind of battle the legions are trained for. There is no rhythm to it, no clean exchange of shield and sword. It is chaos. And for once, that is the advantage. Tavros crashes into the front line like a storm given shape. His sword cleaves through armor, not with finesse, but with desperation. He doesn't count his kills. He only moves forward. One Roman raises a spear and catches his shoulder. He growls, shoves through it, and pulls the man down with him into the snow, where the world becomes red. Lucia strikes from the flank, sliding between soldiers with her blade low and quick. She doesn't speak, doesn't scream. She is silent death, swift and certain. A young soldier turns to run. She knocks him flat with the hilt of her knife. She doesn't kill him. He's too young, too scared. But she leaves a mark. Felix is slower. His hands are not made for war. His spear wavers, but he holds the line, standing beside two rebels he barely knows. He sees one fall, then the other. He does not run. He doesn't swing wildly. He just stands, because that's all he can do. And sometimes that is enough. Mira waits back at the ridge with the injured, her arms full of cloth and herbs, her heart pounding harder than it did in any storm. Gaius clings to her, his face pressed into her side, but even he senses it, that something is happening just out of sight that could end everything. She tries not to imagine it. She focuses on breath, on tending wounds, on staying ready. But her ears are sharp. She listens for one voice in particular. If Spartacus falls, she will feel it like a blade through bone. And Spartacus, he doesn't lead from behind. He cuts through the Roman center with calm precision, a blade in each hand, his body moving not with fury, but with knowledge. He knows where to strike, when to step aside, when to feint. He doesn't waste movement. He doesn't waste time. He is not here to survive. He is here to make a point. That Rome is not eternal, that Rome can bleed, that when the forgotten rise, they do not ask permission. The Romans regroup quickly. They always do. They fall into defensive formation, shields locked, spears out. For a moment, it seems like they might push the rebels back, inch by inch, like they've done 100 times before. But this time, the rebels don't retreat. They press in. Not because they think they'll win, because they know there is no retreat. The battle lasts hours, longer than any of them can remember, longer than it should. The snow is churned into mud, the mud into blood. The ridge above becomes a graveyard of steel and shattered breath. When the last Roman falls, it is not with ceremony. There is no final blow, no heroic cry. He simply drops, sword still in hand, eyes wide with something between confusion and awe, as if he cannot understand how a band of escaped slaves and farmers and ghosts could undo an empire's finest. The rebels do not cheer. They do not celebrate. They count the living. They count the dead. Lucia walks among the fallen, blood on her hands, jaw clenched. She finds Tavros sitting against a tree, breathing heavily, shoulder dark with blood. She kneels, tears the cloth from her sleeve, binds the wound. He doesn't speak, but he doesn't stop her. Felix is on his knees, scraping snow away from a man's face, checking for breath. There is none. He places 2 fingers to the man's lips anyway, then closes the eyes and whispers something that sounds like a prayer, though Felix never believed in gods. Mira holds a child in her arms, a girl with a gash across her side. Not Gaius, another, one who wandered too close to the edge. She rocks the girl gently, even though she's already gone. When she finally lays her down, she wraps her in all the cloth she has left. Spartacus stands at the edge of the field, his blade still in hand, breathing slowly. He surveys the wreckage, the bodies, the smoke, the cost. A younger man might collapse from the weight. He does not, but he feels it. Deep. He turns to Felix. Write it. Felix nods, though his fingers shake. All of it? All of it. Lucia approaches next. We can't stay here. No, Spartacus says. We move at dawn. To where? He looks north beyond the valley toward a horizon they've never seen. Wherever they don't expect. That night there is no fire, there is no warmth, but there is resolve. And for rebels, that's all that's left. Dawn comes like a wound reopening, slow, raw, and without mercy. The valley is silent now, save for the occasional groan of pine under snow and the distant echo of birds who do not know what happened here. The rebels wake stiffly, every limb sore, every eye carrying the shadows of the night before. No one speaks of the fallen, not yet. Grief is too large to name so early. Instead, they gather what they have left and begin moving. One step, then another. They do not carry their dead. There are too many, and the mountain too cold. So they bury what they can, cover the rest with stones, and whisper names to the sky. Felix carves each name into bark, fingers numb, eyes burning. Some names he knows, others he invents, because no one should vanish nameless. He tucks each piece of bark into a pouch and ties it tight. A history not yet finished. Tavros limps more now. The shoulder wound has stiffened, and the mountain air has made his breath shorter, his steps slower. But he refuses help. Lucia offers anyway, slipping beside him to share the weight of his pack. He doesn't thank her. She doesn't expect it. They simply walk together, step for step, like comrades who no longer need words. Mira keeps to the middle of the group, Gaius in her arms again, though he is growing heavier by the day. He has not spoken since the last battle. Not a word. Not even in sleep. But his eyes are clear, alert, watching everything. She whispers to him as they move, small things, memories, stories of places he's never seen. There's a city beyond these hills, she says, where the rivers are warm and the people smile without fear. She doesn't know if it's true, but she needs to believe it might be. Spartacus walks at the rear, his presence a wall that holds the group together. His cloak is torn, the left side of his tunic soaked in blood that is not his. He carries no banner, no map, only the knowledge that they cannot stop. He watches the snow behind them, alert for pursuit. Rome does not give up easily. It retreats, regroups, and returns with fire. He knows this better than anyone. By midday, the trail narrows again. They pass through a gorge where the cliffs rise like jaws on either side. Snow hangs in the air like breath held too long. Every sound echoes. A child cries, a pot drops, the air stills. Then a sound, sharp, sudden, metal. They freeze. Lucia steps forward first, blade drawn, eyes narrowed. Tavros joins her, dragging his bad leg behind but lifting his sword with both hands. The others crouch, press back, shield the youngest. For a heartbeat, the gorge holds its breath. Then from the shadows, a figure, alone. Not Roman. A woman, older, wrapped in thick furs, hands raised. Behind her, others begin to appear, dozens. Maybe more. Men, women, children. Not soldiers. Survivors. They don't speak Latin. But they don't have to. They gesture toward the path ahead, toward a camp just beyond the bend, a place to rest, a place to warm. The rebels hesitate. Every offer now could be a trap, but they are too tired to fight shadows. Spartacus gives a nod. We follow. The camp is small, tents made of animal hide, smoke curling from stone pits, fish drying on racks beside the river. These people are not part of the empire. They live outside its reach, its rules, its hunger. They see the rebels and do not flinch. They do not kneel. They offer food, fire, blankets, a different kind of power. Lucia eats slowly, as if afraid the warmth might disappear if she moves too fast. Mira cries when she sees Gaius smile for the first time in days. Tavros lets a stranger rewrap his wound without protest. Felix, unable to write with frozen fingers, speaks instead, quietly, to a boy who listens without understanding but seems to grasp the weight of the words. That night, the rebels sleep in borrowed peace. No alarms, no sentries, just breathing, just dreams. Spartacus does not sleep. He stands at the edge of the camp, watching the stars rise, one hand on his blade, the other on the hilt of a truth too sharp to sheath. They are not safe, not really, but for the first time he thinks they might be something else. Not soldiers, not slaves, something harder to define, something Rome cannot name. Morning returns with a sky that feels impossibly open, cloudless, vast, unscarred by the dark dreams that usually haunt their sleep. For once, the rebels wake not to urgency, but to the gentle sound of water flowing, birds singing from trees that haven't yet been burned by empire. The air is still cold, but it carries no threat, only the scent of pine and smoke and something that almost feels like safety. The people of the mountain camp move quietly around them, offering bowls of broth, thick cloaks, soft grunts of understanding. They ask no questions, not where the rebels come from, not what they've done. Their silence is not ignorance, it is mercy. In a world where everyone has suffered, there is comfort in not needing to speak the pain aloud. Mira wakes to find Gaius gone from her arms, but only for a moment. She panics, heart racing, until she sees him sitting with an old woman near the fire, learning how to peel roots with a bone-handled knife. He is smiling, his fingers move with a kind of reverence. He looks up, catches Mira's eyes, and gives a shy nod. It is the first time he's acknowledged the world since the battle. Mira's throat tightens, she doesn't cry. Not this time. She simply walks over, kneels beside him, and takes his hand. Together, they peel. Tavros rests longer than usual. His body aches in ways he didn't know were possible. Every scar feels fresh again. But the pain is clean now, not poisoned by fear. He sits on a low bench watching smoke rise from the cook fires, and for the first time in what feels like months, he allows himself to do nothing, to just be. Lucia joins him, carrying a wooden bowl filled with something hot and spiced. She sits without speaking and hands him the food. He takes it, eats slowly. When it's empty, he sets it down and says, "This might be the first meal I've tasted." She smiles, but it's soft, almost sad. Let's hope it's not the last. Felix finds a flat stone and sits beside a cluster of trees, unwrapping his pouch of writings. His fingers are stiff, but the warmth has returned enough to let him hold the charcoal again. He doesn't write about battles today. He writes about small things. A child's laugh, the way steam curls off the river, the crackle of bark in firelight. He's building a history, yes, but not just of death, of everything they survived for. Spartacus moves through the camp like a shadow that has grown roots. He thanks the elders in his quiet way. Short bows, small gifts. A piece of metal reshaped into a tool. A strip of dried meat from their own stores. He listens more than he speaks, learning what he can of the terrain ahead, the villages beyond the peaks, the rhythm of a land that Rome has not yet bent to its will. And for the first time in many moons, he does not carry his sword. That evening, the camp gathers, not at Spartacus's order, not as a strategy, but because they want to, because fires feel warmer when shared, because after so many nights of silence and steel, a story is worth more than armor. An elder speaks first, not in Latin, but in the tongue of the mountains, a rough dialect, thick with consonants, but somehow musical. As she speaks, others translate, slowly, carefully. She tells of the first snow that came too early, the bear that wandered into camp and was led away with a trail of berries. Of how, once, long ago, a woman crossed the Alps with nothing but a dog and a walking stick and lived to plant the first seeds of this very village. Mira listens, holding Gaius close. Tavros leans against a tree, eyes half closed. Lucia sharpens a small blade, but not from fear, out of habit. Felix writes again, only now with a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Spartacus stands a little apart, watching his people, not as soldiers, as souls. And in that moment, they are not rebels, not fugitives. They are guests, survivors, witnesses to something older than war, quieter than conquest. They are human, still. As the fire burns low, Spartacus steps forward. He does not speak to all, only to the mountain people. "You have given us something Rome never could," he says. "Not because you are strong, but because you are kind." The elder nods. Kindness is the oldest strength. They sleep again that night without weapons in their hands. And in the stillness just before dawn, a new question rises. Not who they've been or what they've lost, but who they might become. They rise the next morning with a softness none of them quite recognize. Muscles still ache, the cold still cuts deep, but something has shifted, not outside, but within. It's not comfort, not safety. It's the absence of dread. The knowledge that, for a brief window of time, the world was not trying to kill them. Spartacus walks the perimeter at dawn, as he always does, eyes scanning tree lines, ridge lines, the curve of the snow beneath their feet. But there's no tension in his shoulders this time, no sword drawn. He watches the smoke of early fires drift upward and lets his breath settle into the rhythm of quiet life. This place has no name. It doesn't need one. What it offers cannot be recorded on maps. Lucia sharpens her dagger beside a half-frozen stream, but the movement is slow, almost absent-minded. Her thoughts are elsewhere. On the way Gaius laughed, when the old mountain woman taught him to call birds, on how Tavros finally ate 2 full bowls of stew without stopping to wince. She wonders, briefly, what it might feel like to stop running entirely. Not today, not soon, but someday. Tavros tries to help stack firewood, but his shoulder protests. One of the villagers, a man with a face like a weathered stone, waves him off gently and finishes the job himself. Tavros sits, breathing heavily, not from exertion, but from shame. He's not used to stillness. His whole body was forged in the fire of resistance. Rest feels like rust. But then Lucia sits beside him without a word, hands him a mug of something bitter and steaming, and somehow it feels less like defeat, more like grace. Mira is teaching the children to boil pine sap, to find clean water beneath snow. Her voice carries across the camp like a song only some can hear. Gaius walks a step behind her everywhere she goes, and when she kneels, he kneels. When she smiles, he almost does too. Felix notices. He sketches them with the edge of his charcoal, mother and son, not by blood, but by fire and choice. Felix himself has become quiet. He writes only in the evenings now, letting the day pass through him before he commits it to words. His latest pages are less battle, more breath. He writes of warmth, of stew shared around a circle, of songs sung in strange dialects under starlight. He wonders if this chapter in their story will read like a dream to those who find it, if anyone does. He doesn't care. For now, it's enough to write the truth. The mountain people continue their work around the rebels, never pushing, never prying. They move with the confidence of those who owe the world nothing and fear nothing from it. Some of the rebels try to help, repairing fishing nets, gathering kindling, patching furs, but it's clear who are guests and who are hosts. There is no resentment, only rhythm. On the 4th day, the weather changes, the wind sharpens, the clouds return, and with them something else. A rider, alone, exhausted, not from the mountains, from the south. The camp stills as the figure slides from the horse and collapses into the snow. Spartacus is the first to reach him, rolling the man onto his side. His lips are blue, his fingers blackened, but in his frostbitten hand, something clenched tight. A scroll. Spartacus breaks the seal and reads. Then his face hardens. Rome has crossed the northern pass. Not a rumor, not a scouting force. 2 legions, marching, burning villages behind them. The message is short and ends with one final sentence. They come not to reclaim, but to erase. The news spreads through the camp like fire catching dry grass. The silence it brings is louder than any scream. The rebels don't panic. They don't scatter. They've survived worse. But the peace cracks. The moment shatters. The dream ends. Spartacus gathers them at dusk, not in the center of the camp, at the edge, where they can see the sky darkening over the trees, the clouds thickening like a storm building in the lungs of the earth. He speaks simply. They come fast. No one asks who. He continues. We can't outrun them. Not forever, but we can choose the ground. Lucia nods. Felix writes one word. Stand. Mira takes Gaius's hand and doesn't let go. Tavros finally draws his blade again. It feels unfamiliar now, cold, heavier than he remembers, but it's still his. Spartacus points to the ridge above the valley. There. It's high, steep, defensible. If they fall knowing they stood. That night, there is no sleep, only preparation, only resolve, and the long, slow return of steel to their hands and fire to their eyes. They climb before sunrise, long before the snow has softened, while the frost still holds the ground like a warning. Each step is deliberate, each breath visible, curling upward into the pale blue sky that does not care who wins or loses. They carry what they need: blankets, blades, bandages, food for 2 days at most. The rest they leave behind. The villagers offer them solemn nods and in some cases quiet blessings in a language that feels older than war. No one begs them to stay. No one promises rescue, only respect. Spartacus leads the way up the ridge, his stride steady, eyes fixed ahead. He says nothing, but everyone hears him. He walks like a man who has accepted the weight of fate and decided to shape it anyway. Behind him, Tavros limps in silence, the pain now fused with his bones like a second spine. Lucia follows close, scanning the trees for movement. She doesn't expect mercy. She only hopes for enough time. Mira carries Gaius on her back, wrapped tightly in wool and leather. The boy doesn't cry, he hasn't for days, but he clutches her neck like he knows this is not just another walk through the snow. He watches the horizon like he's memorizing it. Felix struggles with the climb, the pack heavier than he'd like to admit, but he doesn't stop. Every footstep is another line in the story, another sentence for the world that comes after, if there is one. He's begun writing phrases in his head, keeping them alive until his hands are free. The last march of the unwanted, he thinks, not to surrender, but to be seen. By midday, they reach the summit. It is brutal, jagged stone, no cover, but clear sightlines in every direction. To the east, the path Rome will take, winding through the valley like a scar. To the west, cliffs that drop into shadow. There is no retreat from here, only choice, only stand or fall. They dig in. Not trenches, there's no soil, only frost-hardened rock. But they build walls with snow and stone, set traps with rope and sharpened branches. Every movement is slow, precise. This is not a fort. It is a line in the snow. A final breath before the plunge. Spartacus assigns positions with a quiet nod to each. Tavros on the south bend, where the slope is steepest. Lucia and 3 others guarding the trail. Mira and 2 more ready with medical supplies beneath the largest outcrop. Felix, he's told to stay behind. He argues. Spartacus doesn't raise his voice. Right, he says, that's your blade. And Felix obeys. As night falls, the cold returns with new cruelty. Wind slices through their layers like knives, but they light no fire, no smoke, no signal. Just silence and stillness and breath shared between the living. Lucia sleeps in fits, dagger tucked against her ribs. Tavros doesn't sleep at all. He watches the trail, eyes narrowed, fingers twitching from cold and tension. Mira hums again, almost silently, a lullaby no one else knows the words to. Gaius sleeps beside her, curled like a small animal trying to disappear into the stone. Felix writes by starlight, not about war, about hope. The hope that tomorrow, when Rome crests the ridge, they will see more than rebels. They will see the price of cruelty. They will see people who refuse to vanish. Before dawn, Spartacus speaks again, just once. To live free was never a guarantee, but to die free, that we can choose. And then the horns sound. Far below, 2 columns of light pierce the dark. Roman torches, hundreds, maybe more, marching up the valley like a tide that forgot how to turn. The rebels stand, not tall, not proud, just ready. This is not a battle they expect to win. This is a statement carved in breath and frost, a message to a world that forgot them. The sound reaches them before the soldiers do. The distant thrum of boots in snow, the steady ring of metal against armor, the disciplined cadence of an army that has never imagined losing. Rome advances without fear, not because they're brave, but because they've forgotten what fear looks like. The rebels crouch low along the ridge, breath steaming in the cold, hearts pacing against the silence like drums waiting to be struck. There are no speeches, no final prayers, just the sharp inhale before history happens. Spartacus stands behind a low wall of rock, eyes fixed on the winding path below. He studies the Roman formation, how they fan out in tiers, how their standards glint in the pale light. 2 legions, as expected. Disciplined, clean, terrifying, but they move like machines, predictable. Spartacus doesn't smile, he never does, but he understands the rhythm. He knows how machines break, 1 piece at a time. Tavros braces himself beside a narrow choke point, hands gripping his blade tighter than ever. The leather wrapping is slick with melting frost, but he doesn't adjust. His whole body has become a weapon honed by exhaustion. When the first Roman scout rounds the corner, Tavros doesn't wait. He lunges forward, blade flashing, and the man drops without a sound. Lucia sees it from across the ridge and signals with her hand, 3 fingers down. Her team moves like water over rock, flowing from position to position, drawing Romans into the traps they spent the last day building. A pit here, a spike there. Nothing elaborate, just enough to stall, just enough to confuse. Mira doesn't fight. She crouches beneath an overhang, turning bloodied cloth into tourniquets, heating stones with her breath to press against wounds. She mutters instructions like spells, fingers flying, eyes clear. Gaius stays beside her, silent but alert, handing her what she needs before she even asks. He's not a child anymore, not here. Felix watches from a narrow slit in the rock, charcoal forgotten in his lap. He cannot look away. Every scream, every clash, every fall writes itself into his memory. But when one rebel stumbles when Lucia takes a cut across her side, he moves. He drops the slate, grabs the knife, and runs. It's not a charge, not a cry for glory, just movement, instinct. He reaches her just in time to pull her away from the edge, arm wrapped around her waist as they slide behind cover. Blood stains his shirt, but it isn't his. Not yet. Lucia grits her teeth, not from pain, but from fury. "Don't die, stupid," she hisses. Felix nods, trying not to. The battle is not clean, it never was going to be. Rome adapts, they find paths, they regroup, they begin to climb the ridge from both sides now. Spartacus sees it, feels it, the end isn't far. He moves through the fray like a shadow made solid. His sword is slick, his armor cracked, but his stance never falters. He finds Tavros fending off 2 legionnaires and steps in with the precision of a man who has made peace with death. The soldiers fall. Spartacus doesn't stay. He vanishes into the next bend, the next break in the line. Hours pass. The snow darkens with ash, with blood, with the heat of breath and the cold of steel. The ridge becomes less a place and more a moment stretched to its limits. And then, horns again, not Roman, from the west. Everyone hears it. The rebels freeze, so do the legionnaires, more horns. Then figures, emerging from the trees, from the cliffs, from the places Rome never thought to watch. The mountain people, not many, a few dozen, maybe more. Bows drawn, stones in hand, not trained, but not unarmed. They descend like the wind, quiet, sharp, certain. And Rome, caught between what they thought was behind them and what they never believed was possible, hesitates. Just long enough. Spartacus calls the charge. The rebels rise. Again, for what feels like the 100th time and maybe the last. They rush into the legion's flank with everything they have. Blades, fists, teeth, fury. The mountain people strike from the rear, confusion blooming like fire through ranks too rigid to bend. And then Rome breaks. Not entirely, not forever, but for now. And sometimes that's all you need. The ridge holds, but barely. The snow is no longer white. It's trampled, churned into mud and blood and the shattered remains of spears. Smoke rises not from fire, but from breath. Dozens of them, then hundreds, all ragged and desperate. The Romans retreat first in formation, then in chaos. They scatter down the slope, slipping between trees, dropping shields to move faster. For a moment, just a moment, the rebels don't chase. They watch. Not out of mercy, out of disbelief. They're still standing. Tavros drops to his knees, blade buried in the snow, blood dripping from his lip. His shoulder burns like it's been set aflame, but he's alive. He lifts his eyes and sees Lucia limping toward him, her face pale, one hand pressed against her side. She gives him a crooked grin. "Didn't think we'd still be breathing, did you?" Tavros can't speak. He just lets out a breath that might have once been a laugh. Felix helps Mira carry the wounded behind the makeshift wall. Gaius follows them, quiet as ever, carrying a water skin too large for his hands. Mira is a blur of movement, binding, washing, whispering. She doesn't stop to cry, doesn't even blink hard. She's too busy saving the few left who can still be saved. But every now and then she brushes Gaius's hair back from his face and murmurs, we're okay, as if saying it often enough might make it true. Spartacus does not rest. He walks the ridge like a ghost, checking each body, each rebel, each broken piece of their fragile defense. He doesn't cheer, doesn't allow celebration. They won, yes, but only by inches. And he knows Rome. Rome will return. Still, something has changed. The mountain people move among them like kin now, offering herbs, helping lift the dead, nodding in silent solidarity. They say little, but their presence speaks louder than words. They didn't come because they were asked. They came because they saw the smoke and chose a side. Spartacus meets with their elder that evening, a man whose face seems carved from the stone they walk on. They speak by firelight, no witnesses, just two leaders who have buried more than they built. No treaty is signed, no pact declared, but when they rise, they do so as allies. That night, the rebels sleep in shifts, but the sleep is real, not the haunted dozing of the hunted. Actual rest. Felix dreams for the first time in weeks, a dream without violence, just a long road and the sound of wind in the trees. He wakes before sunrise and writes it down, almost shyly, as if it might vanish if spoken aloud. By morning, the valley below is empty of Romans, nothing but their scattered gear, burned standards, and tracks in the snow. The rebels descend slowly, carefully. No one wants to believe it's over. Spartacus orders a sweep, 4 pairs checking every bend, every shadow. They return with no sign of pursuit. Lucia stands at the center of what was once the Roman line, lifts a broken gladius from the ground and stares at it like it's a relic. She tosses it aside, then lights a small fire and begins to cook. Just something simple, roots and salt and water. No one asks. They just gather and eat, together. No one says victory. It doesn't feel like one. It feels like survival, worn thin but still intact. It feels like breath. Later, as the sun sinks and the valley begins to fade into frost again, Spartacus gathers them for the first time since the battle. He doesn't stand on anything, doesn't raise his voice, he simply begins. You weren't supposed to be here. A murmur ripples. He goes on. You were supposed to be chained, forgotten, starved, silenced. Rome wrote the end of your story before you could speak it yourselves. He looks around, letting the silence grow heavy. But here you are, broken, bleeding, angry, and alive. You think this is the end. It isn't. This was a moment, a message. Rome will come again with more soldiers, more fire. But today we reminded them. He takes a breath, and tomorrow we decide what comes next. No one applauds. They don't need to. They simply look at each other differently now, not as the lost, but as the returned. The rebel line has held, and now it begins again. Days pass, and the snow begins to thaw. Not completely, just enough to let the earth breathe again. The silence that follows the battle isn't hollow. It's dense, full of things unsaid, of futures unshaped. The rebels don't talk much about what happened. There are too many ghosts to sort through and too many tasks to finish. They bury their dead in rows on the ridge, marking each with stones, not names. The names are in Felix's book now. That's where they'll live. Tavros helps dig the graves despite the pain in his shoulder, jaw clenched tight. Each shovelful is heavier than the last, but he keeps going until someone finally pulls him away. He doesn't thank them. He just sits on a rock and stares at the sky for an hour. When Lucia joins him, she doesn't say anything either. She places a piece of flatbread in his hand and walks away. Lucia herself seems quieter now, not from grief, but from a calm that no one quite understands. She was always sharp, always bracing against the next blow, but now there's something steady behind her eyes. Like the mountain has sunk into her bones. She sharpens her blade still, but she's begun to teach others how to do it too. If you don't learn this, she tells a younger rebel, you'll keep dying the wrong way. Mira has returned to her rhythm, though slower now. The wounded come to her with more reverence, not just because she saved so many, but because they saw her refuse to break. She teaches Gaius to grind roots, to wrap wounds, to listen to heartbeats. The boy doesn't speak often, but when he does, his voice has changed. It carries something older than a child should know. Mira notices but says nothing. She simply watches him like a tree watches the wind. Felix has filled 2 journals now, one with facts, one with memory. He doesn't always know where one ends and the other begins. He records not just the battles, but the food they ate, the jokes someone made by the fire, the way Spartacus spoke without looking anyone directly in the eye, as if his vision lived in the future. At night, Felix sometimes reads out loud, not to the others, but to the ridge itself, to the air, to the idea that somewhere, someone will hear. And Spartacus, he has not stopped. Even now, with the Romans gone and the mountain quiet, he walks the perimeter every morning. He speaks with the elders, with scouts, with rebels who now come from farther villages, from camps they'd never known existed. Word is spreading, not just of the battle, of something larger, something that might not be a rebellion anymore, something that might be a beginning. One evening, a messenger arrives. She is young, lean, her hands covered in ink and soot. She carries no weapon, just a scroll. Spartacus reads it without speaking, then hands it to Felix. It is not from a general, not from a king. It is from a village far east near the salt plains. They heard what happened. They want to help. Food maybe, shelter. More than that, they want to know how to begin. Spartacus looks up at the fire, at the people gathered around it, at what they've become. Then we build, he says simply. So they do. Not fast, not loud, but piece by piece. They carve new paths through the trees. They mark safe crossings in the river. They train, not just to fight, but to survive, to teach, to heal. Rebels become leaders. Runners become teachers. Children begin to play again. And somewhere in the middle of it all, someone plants a seed. Literally, a single shoot in the thawed earth. Felix writes about it like it's a miracle, because it is. The mountains no longer feel like the edge of the world. They feel like the start of one. One night, weeks later, Spartacus stands alone on the same ridge where they once made their last stand. The stars are clear, the wind soft, and behind him the sound of laughter, real, full, unburdened. He closes his eyes and breathes it in. This is not peace, not yet, but it's close enough to imagine it, and maybe, just maybe, that's how it begins. If you're still here with me, breathing a little deeper, maybe blinking back the last few shadows, then thank you. Stories like this aren't just battles and blood. They're about endurance, about memory, about what we carry with us long after the final clash. If something in this journey spoke to you, I want to hear it. Tell me what stayed with you. Was it a moment, a character, a question that still lingers? Scroll down, take a breath, and leave a comment. Let's talk about it. Let's remember it together. And if this kind of storytelling matters to you, if you want to be part of a community that digs deeper, that listens in the dark and reflects in the light, then I'd be honored if you subscribe to the channel. It's how we keep telling these stories. It's how we grow. But for now, this is where we part ways. Until the next night, the next tale, the next step in the dark. Rest well, and I'll see you in the next story.